Alright, locomotive engine breakdowns and how to repair them with questions and answers illustrated by Wallace. Locomotive breakdowns answered and illustrated by W.G. Wallace for past president, Traveling Engineering Association Index, Quick Reference Guide, Chicago, Frederick J. Derrick Corporation, publisher 1907. Locomotive breakdowns answers illustrated being the nearly 400 questions we were asked enginemen during the series of the years they answered Mr. Wallace columns of the Brotherhood Locomotive Fire magazine. The cover almost every possible breakdown, including many difficult problems, also answered with a clear-cut manner in simple terms, easily comprehended railway man. Preface: the question and the answers therefore have given in a compact book that was asked through the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineer Firemen by the members of the Brotherhood and answered through the columns of Mr. W.G. Wallace. They have been collected together, carefully revised, edited for the publication in its form. The question of the outcome of the SAG meets for the problems encountered with the daily work. Practical men, they covered the range of subject in preparing with a compact form and going between the covers of the book. Greater care when bestowed upon the index. Each question and answer has been given a number by the reference to index, which alphabetically arranged the question and the answer will readily found with the numbers of the system and the cross index, which has employed whenever possible. No expense has been spared for the using of the diagrams can illustrate the diagram answer that clearly understand the subject seemed to be possible by doing so. So doing. Mr. G.W. Wallace needs no introduction by you for the great army of locomotive engineer and firemen. For many years he has been a writer for the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen magazine, other technical publications, and another favorable treatise of the locomotive running of the quarter century. Has been engaged in the motive power department and in the railways accumulated knowledge and acknowledged authority of the question relating to locomotive running with a widely known. He desires to take opportunity to express publicity through the use of his thanks for the editor of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen, according to his permission to the published book from the question and the answers which answer for the publication. He has also wished to express the hope in many other convenient form than prove the particular benefit than to those who otherwise might never see him. Railway Publication Society. Alright, this is a supplemental art reading of the, alright, this is your boiler, different split sections. Other parts, headlamp, alright, locomotive breakdown question. Crossfeed lubricator is possibly for the lubricator to crossfeed allow the oil to go in the one steam shaft. The answer is possible for some lubricator for the crossfeed, although it does not have frequently with the choke of the oil or the oil pipe stuffed up with the lubricator for the equalizing bit becomes filled with the water of the oil, instead leading force from the choke plug with the steam from equalizing tube rises from the water to the top of the equalizing tube of the condensing chamber that carried out with the equalizing tube on the opposite side, and the choke plug on the oil pipe on the side of the three has the equalizing tube on there for crossfeed that can usually be detected with the sluggish manner in which the oil rises through water on the defective side of the lubricator bypass valve on the lubricators. The advance of the bypass valve, that is speaking of lubrication, explain how. The answer is the advantage of the bypass valve lubricator is to take the place of the hand oiler, and in the case of the feed valve is stopped upon the glass breaks in the valve of the cylinders and can be lubricated without shutting off the steam. When the bypass valve is open, the oil will flow directly from the oil reserve through the bypass valve to the oil pipe that can be regulated from the same valve when necessary, but it would be not cited with the lubricated with the bypass valve that are being used. Motion of the main pins. Describe the motion of the main pin with the locomotive is moving along. Answer: the motion is like this. See the illustration. It's got a sin wave in it. The position of the eccentric rods in relationship with the line of the block, which are the positioning of the eccentric rod and the linking block, or forward and or backward rotation. Nearly opposite line in motion and front end appliance Name what the adjustment can be made with the difference applied at the front end of the locomotive with the effect of changing and the effect of changing each of the on the fire. Answer. The master mechanic stand front end of the arrangement consists of the diaphragm, petticoat, pipe, the exhaust nozzle, and netting. The adjustment R2, the raise to lower the petticoat, pipe, the diaphragm, and decrease the diameter of the nozzle. The diagram is an apron extending toward the above of the top of the rose and flows usually forward in front of the exhaust pipe, and the purpose of the equalizing pipe draft of the fire. Raising the diagram causes the fire to burn most like in the back end of the box, and lower in the case of the fire burn most at the front end of the firebox. If you get in position, burn with the fire evenly with a great surface. Utilize the heating of the surface of the fluid. You have done all you can do with a petticoat with the purpose of regulating the draft of the fire, usually made with the two pieces lower of the part with having a flare when the call of the pipe. And in the straight part of the top of the sleeve, now you can see the pipe of the sleeve extend through the base of the sack at the bottom of the smoke box. There would be very little within any differ after the fire, but moving the top of the part of the sleeve down from the bottom of the pipe up for the top of the nozzle for the draft and creep with certain limits, are therefore raising the pipe at lowering the sleeve and decreasing the draft and raising the sleeve, lowering the pipe, decrease the draft nozzle of the petticoat pipe at the sack are the same in the relationship of the front end of the arrangement with the tube nozzle to the injector with the put and the induced currents. Only one is water, with the other is steam and gas. The decreasing of the diameter of the nozzle tip will sometimes increase the draft of the fire, but also increase the back pressure of the cylinder nozzle that should be bushed and reduced only to the last resort. 6. Radial stated crown sheet. What are the advantages of the radial stated crown sheet? Answer. What crown are used for the support the crown with the crown sheet with the made more than flat with a radial stay with the crown bar for the top take up the water space and would be moderately water with the used for the help to collect the mud on the crown sheet. Radial stays used for the crown sheet may be given with a considerable curve but that saves the place as near right as possible. The advantages and less accumulated in the crown sheet, and radial stays for the crown bar for the wish of the water with the curved surface to wash for the mud from the crown sheet. Radial stays up to take the less of the room with much of the cheaper, give it a better chance for the washer of the boiler. Main and securing firebox sheets. How are the inside of the outside sheets of the firebox secured at the bottom? The inside outside sheets are riveted with the mud ring at the bottom of the firebox. This is only the wrought iron shape of the conform of the firebox. Long rivets of the weave that they pass through the ring, both in sheets of the riveted over. Mud in the leg firebox. What would be effective with the length of the firebox becoming then filled with the mud? But the answer is the water would not come into contact with the inside sheet, but would become burned and overheated, but that would cause the bowls of the cracking and stay pipe if you would pull the sheets and necessitating patches that half side of the firebox. 9. Overheating of the firebox. What would be the result of firebox heat has become overheated with the firebox sheets, so they'll become overheated with the metal, but it becomes soft in the pressure with the force of the sheet, with the staples pull the fires with the flue sheet. This is an important part of the engine duty with the keep the crown with the sheet wet. With the results of if you will cause the look of the positive elsewhere if you do not. Position for the boiler checks. Where a boiler check place you're so far away from the firebox. Answer. Because of the convenient place for the boiler to attach them, they are liable to be knocked off. Introducing cold feed water as far as possible from the firebox, given the advantage of the increasing the temperature between the comes in contact with the head sheets of the firebox. 11. The cast steel wheel centers. Why do the cut cast steel water centers on the rim, putting in the filling of the pieces to prevent the rim from breaking? The cuts are placed in the rim counterbalance to prevent the unequal contraction of the metal with the cracking and the breaking of the rim wheel, owing to the large amount of the metal with the counterbalance at the pin hub, the small amount of the rib wheel, and the filling of the pieces of the liability fracture in the rim is lessened. 12. Size and nozzle tips. What is the size of the nozzle tip you recommended to place for the passenger engineer with a 20-inch cylinder, 26-inch stroke with a Jack Wilson high-pressure valve with a 200 pounds of steam pressure? Answer. Use a large nozzle tip most possible consistent with the steam making with the quality of the coal used. With the recommended nozzle tip of 5.18 inch in diameter, decreasing the increase for the size of the requirements leading the clearance. What should the valves have to when inside the clearance? An option is different from the lead to the clearance. The clearance may be vary from 0 to 1/8 of an inch. Valves must be set according to the idea of the past best practices, depending on their design valve with the gear length with the eccentric rod and radius. Alright, this shows the boiler riveting machine. The boiler should be suspended with the chain, but the overhead travel through the raised lowered, and is required with the sheets between the fixed die, with which form the head of the inside shell, movable die with the finish of the end, with the rivet with the hydraulic power on the offices. Dispose the boiler sent on erection shop. Riveting finish with the bolts screwed in and done with the dome mounted tube sheets inserted. This shows the erecting a locomotive. Billows and cylinders of the fireplace driving the wheels in place. Lagging on the boiler. Some strips of magnesium are used for the purpose of the focus for the cleats of the wire hoops and include the shell of the cylinders are lagged with the cement outside of the lagging fastened with a protective sheet of iron. Continuing contention and the lead of the clearance. What lead the valve that they have inside of the clearance? Option difference with the lead clearance. Lead and clearance. The clearance may be 0 for the 1/8 inch, maybe it's 7 in the corner, but the idea of the best practice independent of the design valve gear letting with the eccentric rod radius of the length of the valve set at 3/32 of an inch blind with the forward motion line and line 1/16 of an inch blind with the back motion. The valve would have about 3/16 to 7/32 of an inch lead at the 5 to 6 inch cutoff will give it the satisfactory services. Lead increases the lever that hooked up with the torque with the center of the serve of the retarder with the position instead of the accelerating unit. Wait until the position is passive with the center of the give the port of the option emit steam to be pushed along. The excessive lead is too much along on the good effect. 14. Effective changing the back motion. Eccentric with the effect would change the back motion, but the eccentric valve would show with 1/16 of the blind instead of the line having on the forward motion. Answer by setting the eccentric in the back motion, blind reduces the amount of lead in the forward motion lever that is hooked up from the short cutoff of both of the motion saving, giving them the lead in the full gear. Lead will increase in the proportion of the radius and the length of the block with the retort with the center of the link and setting up the back motion blind reduces the lead of the hooked up. 15. Broken back motion eccentric. If you were running an engine on a busy piece of the track, then broke the back motion eccentric, what could you do to facilitate the clearing of the track on other trains? Answer. The engine can be run in forward motion, securing the bottom of the link stationary, working when the engine with the full gear, sometimes readily accomplished in the bolting of the backing motion and eccentric rod with the forward motion eccentric strapping, using a long bolt filling in the space between the bolt rods and block large nuts. This will hold the bottom of the link slightly back original position with the back position eccentric was coupled and strapped with the back motion eccentric with the convenient with the passing position. Positive fastening should be blocked in place between the bottom of the link block with the bottom of the link to prevent the engine from being reversed while running under the above condition. 16. Failure to observe the proper precaution of the broken eccentric. In the event of not disconnecting with the back of the motion eccentric was broken, you would be effective if the lever was not left in full stroke. Answer. The consequent damage of the valve gear with resulting trouble to yourself with expense for the employer if the eccentric broke when they would run hot and break down or pound with the strap to pieces. The back end of the eccentric rod would fall down the strike of the tie if the pressure of the valve would cover the length to tip slide over the line of the block, and because there would be a fastening of the bottom of the link, do not take the chance for the breathing trouble. In motion of the eccentric rod with the fastening of the forward motion strap, the engine would be slightly lame as you hook over the lever towards the center lever was put in the back when the gear with the disabled side with the would work in the forward motions as good for the side should working in the back motion, and the reason for the blocking between the bottom of the line blocking of the link. 17. Cylinder packing rings. What keeps the cylinder packing rings the same type of the snap packing rings are used, but they were not cannot steam go through the one joint of the first ring. They go around and go through the next joint until they went clear through. Answer. Cylinder packing rings are turned slightly in the diameter than the cylinder. When the ring is placed in the position, it has a slip fit with the groove at the seam. The edge of the joint will go under the ring of the balance of the pressure outside of the ring, and they usually overcome. If the ring is in fair condition, you have the spring in the ring and the stream pressure that goes through the joint, tending to the force of the ring outward against the cylinder wall and the cylinder wall began being closed in the seam. The seam is condensed with the condensation helps to keep the packing rings tight. Of course, when the ring becomes worn and loose, it sets the spring, and if the cylinder is worn out with the round or cut, space between the rings and cylinder wall is greater than the seam will blow through. 18. Valve out without outside inner and inside lap. Would there be an expansion of the valve without an outside the inside lap with the reverser level hooked up with the 6-inch notch where the engine cuts off the seam at 6 inches with the valve having in the lap. The answer, the advantage of the lap of the valve is the steam that may be used expensively with the lap of the valve. The portion of the cut-off of the steam expands with the cylinder until the port of the open with the exhaust. If you use the valve that has no lap outside, but the inside edge would register with the edge of the steam, and the least amount of the valve would give the steam emission at one end of the cylinder exhaust at each of the other, and you cannot use the steam expansively with the valve without the lap. In this case, you would have the eccentric set with the right angles to the pin with the lap. When the lap is added to the valve engine, give them lead eccentric and then advance with the mount with the right angle. 19. Expansion and cutoff. How the expansion increase with the reverse level to how it hooked toward the center, and does the valve travel slower in the relationship to the position within the 6-inch cutoff that would at full stroke. Answer. In speaking expansion, we mean that work done with expansive force, steam pushing with the piston near the end of the stroke. The steam is cut off the port of the close of the valve of the lever hooked up toward the center, but the steam is cut off earlier in the stroke with the stroke position and the constant cannot be changed, say 26 or 28 inches when the lever is in full gear steam and then is emitted to the cylinder nearly as in full stroke. But by hooking the reverse lever up to the travel valve with the shortened and port with the closed cut off the steam when the position and piston is made only with the portion of the stroke. Therefore, the shorter the cutoff, the greater the expansion. The steam confined end of the cylinder will expand with the piston reach of the part of the stroke where the port is open with the steam to escape what is known as the opening of the exhaust. The valve must travel over its seat at a full stroke with twice the lap and twice with the width of the port of the opening. A 6-inch cutoff would travel to twice the lap of the port opening as both, but as port would not be full open if it would not travel as far as or as fast as it would in a full stroke. The full gear with the link of the bolt block would nearly be opposite, but the eccentric rod with the rod would control the movement, but the short cutoff receives the motion from near of the center of the link of the bolt's eccentric clock. Look over where you would look this over when you are under the engine, and if you have the lever move with the full gear and 6-inch notch, it would happen to understand. It will help you understand. Alright, 20. Equalizing tube and lubricators. Please explain the equalizing tube and lubricator when all the lubricators are supplied with them, and some lubricators do not seem to have them on the outside. Answer. The use of the equalizing tube of the lubricator is equalizing the pressure type of the water in the side feed glass with the steam entry of the condensing chamber, the condensed forming the water with the oil and the float of the water in the oil reservoir of the lubricator with the fills the oil pipes leading to the side feed glass with the oil. The feed valves are open when they have the pressure of the steam, the wave of the water with the force of the oil through the nipple of the side feed glass. When using the equalizing tube at the stop of the enlarged choke plug, with you have the condition with the throttle closed and the oil force through the feed valve of the nipple of the steam. The equalizing tube is connected to the cavity above the side feed glass, and the steam exerts the pressure on the top of the water in the glass. This is the equalizer pressure with the lubricator. We'll have the weight of the water and the heat condensing the chamber to the force out the nipple with the buoyancy of the oil cup to rise surface with the water with the side feed glass when it was carried into the oil pipe by the steam that came into the top of the water with the equalizing tube while forcing a small jet of steam and the oil through the choke plug on one side of the lubricator, the equalizing tube of the inside with the condensing chamber on the other outside. 21. Changing the length of the eccentric rod. What effect would be produced upon the lap leading by changing the length of the eccentric rod? Answer. None of the lap is mounted with the valve extended over the edge of the steam port when the valve is in the center of the seat. The changing of the length of the eccentric rod would not affect the lap lead of the mounted with the opening of the steam port when the position is being in the stroke of the engine is given the lead and advance eccentric toward in the pin. Changing the length of the eccentric rod would not change the lead. The changing length of the eccentric rod would only cause the valve to travel greater unless the distance from the either side of the line drawn through the center of the valve and the center of the seat. 22. Valve motion outside inside emission valve. With the difference in valve motion outside of the inside emission valve, no difference of the valve gear, only with the position of the eccentric relating in relation to the main pin in the engine with the indirect rocker with the valve arm above the rocker box with the link of the below of the rocker box. Outside emission with the eccentric R is set with the right angle of the pin with the advanced toward the pin to the mount with the lap lead. No, if you change the cylinder only on the engine, use the inside emission valve. You would only need to change the position of the eccentrics, and you would set the eccentric with the right angle of the pin. Instead of advancing towards the pin in the amount of lap and lead, you would advance away from the pin in that amount. In case of the desired play with the direct rocker, the one over the valve arm with the link of the arm of the bolt below the rocker box, the eccentric would be right angles to the pin, advance the amount of the lap with the lead toward the pin in the same position where the outside emission valve of the indirect rocker. This shows the diagram of your 232. no, 131. No, 262. 262. Position in each case. Note that the outside emission of the valve is the same direction. Position with the opening of the port emission with the inside of the emission of the valve with the opposite direction with the piston opening port with the emission. 26. Balanced slide valve. What is the balance of the slide valve? How is it balanced and why? Answer. A balanced slide valve is the valve provided with a strip of the ring with the surround with the force and air with the back of the valve to relieve the pressure with the seam. Strip of the ring with the seam type joint with the part of the valve with the underside with the seam chest cover with the note that's playing with the slide valve with the sketch with the EF seam chest pressure with the forcing valve. 2 at C. All the time the throttle is open with the exhaust seam with the seam pressure for the cylinder with the valve is just closed and the seam port with the cover with the seam forcing it up in the seat with the air with the valve being in the same on the bottom of the top of the valve with the seam chest with the pressure with the greater with the friction reducing the absorb the power to reduce the friction lessen the power required to move the valve back further forth over the seat of the emission with the exhaust with the seam and to and from and the cylinder strips the rings and employed with the keep of the pressure from certain portions of the back valve with the show of the sketch from figure 2 with the hole of the holes and made in the back of the valve though any of the leakage steam of the past strips of the rings escape of the exhaust cavity relieving the part of the valve with the steam chest pressure. Valves are balanced in the increasing efficiency with the engine and reducing the cost of lubrication and to make the engine easy handling. Alright, this shows the diagram of the slide valve, the showing of the position of the piston. The piston valve piston chokes of O's is O, the valve check is OB, then each of the quarter turn with one complete revolution. The time started at A, the port of the left, and about with the emission of the steam, the proper the right of the to be connected with the exhauster and the piston, about being outward stroke at the ball parts of the direction as arrows of the road return to the original position. Alright, kerosene and cleaning of the cylinders and valve. It is good to give an engine a kerosene into the release valve with the drifting with the cleaning of the outside cylinders. Answer. If the balance of the strips that have struck on the valve of the back of the ring of the gum of the engine, the position slushing with the kerosene oil will sometimes loosen them up. This should be immediately fouled with a liberal allowance of the valve oil. The solution of lye would do equally as well with the kerosene for the purpose that but would not recommend either. The good dry stream valve oil with the best things to put in the cylinder and the steam shaft for the graphite is used with the feeding it in with the oil water, but do not use low-grade oil and steam shaft for the cylinder that burns out with the cause of the trouble. Do not lubricate the high temperature, keeping the throttle cracked with sufficient opening to end of the relief valve. Shut off with the drifting and then use the dry steam of the valve with the oil with the alleviate the necessary as using anything in the steam chest. 28. The piston valve. What is the piston valve? A. An answer. A piston valve is a valve closed in two pistons considered together with properly fitted with the rings from the edge of the valve with the opening of the closing of the steam of the exhaust ports. 29. Lifting and non-lifting injectors. What is the difference between lifting and non-lifting injectors? Answer. The lifting injector is placed with a high and higher level of the water with the tender to raise the water with the injector, then force it into the boiler. The closed class of the injectors most commonly used for the locomotive. The non-lifting injector must be placed below the low level of the bottom of the water, spacing of the tender, but the water will flow to it and by the own of the weight, by its own weight. After the injector will force it into the boiler. 30. Leak between the injector and the tank. Will an injector work with a leak between the injector and the tank? Why and will it prime? Non-injectors will work with air if the light leak between the injector tender, but providing their sufficient supply with the water flowing into the injector feed pipe. The lifting injector will not work if there was very much of a leak as the air enters the pipe that prevents the injector from forming a necessary vacuum required for the raising of the water. But the injector will not prime, even if it does not prime. The injector will not work to its full capacity, changing on the overflow, but putting on the heater. This will show that the leaks exist for that may even if possible. 31. Exhaust strongest of one side of the stack. Why does it indicate the exhaust issue the strongest over the one side of the stack? If the engine has been in surface with exhaust has filled evenly with the indication that the petticoat pipe is loose and tipped directly in the exhaust of one side of the stack. If the engine has recently passed through the shop of the either with the petticoat with the exhaust pipe, the nozzle tip, or stack are not in line with one another. 32, leaky steamy pipe joint inside of a smoky box. Leaky steamy pipe joint inside a smoky box. What is the effect of the leaky steamy pipe joint inside of the box? So the exhaust pipe, the other steam passing up through the steam expelled with the smoke with the gas in the front end, but producing the partial vacuum in the front end of the air to the supply of the vacuum must be taken with the ash pan grate with a wholly stable with the combustion tube with the fire door with the steam point Joint leaks in the joint under the exhaust pipe with the steam from the blower pipe with the exhaust for the pipe of the air pump with the steam turbine with the eccentric lifting, lighting in are not directed with the up of the stack by stacking the flare with the petticoat with the tip through the leak of the store. Steam will destroy the partial vacuum of the engine, will not steam, the fire will not burn brightly, but will burn with a smoky, dull red color. 33. Leaky check for the injector throttle valve. The will injector the prime of the check leak for the bad or stuck with the up in the front throttle for the valve is bad. And if the check leaks bad, there's no line with the check for the branch pipe of the steam with the hot water with the flow back of the injector, preventing with the vacuum between being of the form of the rate of the water in the injector. If the throttle leak is bad, you will have the same trouble. Some of the injectors have been started with the throttle with the checks leaking through the cold water into the check of the injector with the condensing steam through the pipe to bring water to the injector. Leak pipes. Leaky primary valves. Will the injector primary valve leaks to prevent this working? No, the primary valve leaking will only cause the injector prime when it was not wanted, but would not interfere with the working with the injector when the steam was turned to the force of the water in the boiler to prevent the waste of the water and close the water valve and the tank valve. Alright, operation of sight valve feed lubricator. Describe the manner of which the sight valve lubricator is operates. Steam is condensed in the water flow down to the reserve as the water is heavier with the oil rises flows in the pipe leading the feed valve of the lubricator, the water with the condensing chamber, the A being higher than the oil with the oil cup, giving the oil below with the condenser chamber that becomes pressure equal to the height of the water above the cup. Steam pressure is allowed at the top of the water, tending to force the oil out over the feed valve nipples when feed doors are open. The steam are also bypassed with the equalizing tube of the chamber about the side feed glass with the held back with the choke with the equalizing pressure on the top of the water with the side feed glass for the oil with the cup. Therefore, the feed valves are opening the pressure for the height of the water with the condenser for the buoyancy of the oil and are forced with the drop of the oil through the side feed glass for the oil reaches the surface of the water with the chamber above the side feed glass and the opposite hole of the choke plug with the carrier to the oil pipe leading to the steam chest with the steam through the that flows out through a choke plug. This is why the oil will feed so fast, and when the hole is in choke plug with a worn tube with a large equalizing pipe and stopped up. 36. Effect of the draft of the working lubricator. Does the draft in the open cap of the window affect the working of the lubricator? Why? Answer. The cold air striking with the lubricator will cool and chill the oil with the retards of flow will feed. Valves open to feed with the proper number of the draft, then closing the window, allowing the lubricator to get warm, and the oil will feed faster and through and thus causing the irregularity of the feed. 37. Irregularity of the feed of the lubricator. What else might cause the irregularity of the feed? Dirt and lubricator with the choke plugs worn to the large with the equalizing tube stop with the insufficient air with the steam pipes to the steam supply steam in the lubricator. Sometimes this occurred with the steam when the pipes are tapped to a fountain that is too small with the main opening with the supply of the boiler attachments such as injectors, air pumps, blowers, and smokes consumers, etc. 38. Cleaning of the choker to the lubricator. How would you clean out the chokers? Disconnect the oil pipe, run a small wire through them, and drain the lubricator with the opening feed valve, the drain cock of the opening with the throttle steam with the flow with the steam chest of the lubricator. Main blow with the obstruction of the sight feed glass. It may be necessary to remove the choker to clean out, but care should be exercised not to enlarge the hole in it. 39. Cleaning the sight feed lubricator. If the sight feed stop it up, then how would you clean them? Answer. You can clean the sight feed with removing the regulating valve with the blowing the steam through the nozzle nipple, the running with the fine water with the broom, straw through it, and by draining the oil post with the cup, the closing of the water valve regulates for the opening with the between the condenser for the oil cup, with the blade with the drain with the cock of the arm of the oil cup pan. Open the feed valve with the steam valve with the steam will flow down through the equalizing tube of the steam side feeder glass, forcing the water and obstruction of the oil cup out of the drain cock. Drain, close the drain cock, shove the feed with the valve until the glass becomes filled with water, and the feed will work all right. Sometimes a small piece of the soap put in the lubricator with the oil and then blowing the lubricator out above the manner is improved and will improve the working. 40. Closing the lubricator when waiting on siding. Which is the best practice to close the feed valves, water valve, of the lubricator when waiting on the siding? The feed valve is always with the water valve may not be tight. This is the best leave the water valve open except for with the fill of the lubricator. 41. Filling the lubricator with coal oil. Will any of the bad results ensue when filling the lubricator with full with coal oil? The answer to the question is usually yes. For the oil is heated, the fans may cause the lubricator to bulge or burst. This is not correct if the lubricator not at the correct lubricator is tested before the leave of the factory with the pressure of the 500-600 pounds in there. So the portion of the extending down for the top of the cup that will trap the small amount of the air and the providing with the expansion chamber of the oil become the heat of the machine. Many of the lubricators filled with the overflow. No bad results come from it. Therefore, would say that no bad results would come from the filling of the cup too full. Alright, increasing power of an engine. If there's any possible for the getting of the more power for the engine that there which she is rated, increase for the pressure, increase for the number of the revolutions per minute, but allow the longer cut off of any of the all above and increase for the horsepower of the engine. 43. Side clearance, cylinder clearance of the end blocking with a kind of a kind of a guide of the joke with the bolts on the top of the guide, on over the lower guide, with nothing as the back of the preventing the piston coming from so far back to allow the packing the rings to get into the counter bore. How would you block to prevent the piston coming too far back? Answer: an engine that would allow the packing the rings to get into the counter bore, but the cylinder would have excessive cylinder clearance. All the room there is between the piston and the cylinder head. When the piston is at the end of the stroke, it's called the cylinder clearance. The blocking the crosshead at either end of the stroke, where you would have the thickness for the piston and the flower up of the groove with the backing the ring and the almost width of the ray additional to move the back of the head from before the ring would be caught into the counter board, which rarely even occurs. Even if there should not damage with the result, it would have to discover the repairs that were being made. So block her clear back and get ready to go on one side. 44. Handling heavy the main rods and the breakdowns. It is puzzles how I can handle main rod or the largest locomotive in the case if necessary to take down one road on the road with the seam breakdown such with the broken rod with the crossheads. How would it be let to the go down to the ground that pick up them and put them on the pilot? This how would it help the man could lift not lift. Answer: get the train crew to help you handle the rod and call on the section men if you need them. There is always a way to bring into the broken parts that are necessary. Sometimes in order to get the engine in service, you would hide up the engine. If you brought here in without the main rod, you can always get help. 45. Keying up the draw strap. They say you have to loosen the strap bolts before you can key a draw strap. Please explain how I know if the draw strap by looking at it, if it is correct to loosen the bolt. Do you have the draw straps on the back of the end of the main rod or just to the front end? Answer: a draw strap is used with the front end of the main rods, but some of the classes engine and key goes through the main rod and the strap at the inside of the being placed between the end of the rod and the brass of the bolt is good. Slip fit with the rod with the bolt hole with the strap at the slab. You have to loosen the bolt before you can drive the key. With the arrangement of the key in the front end of the rod is shortened instead of the lengthened. Observe the construction of the stretch, but they may have been reported with the front end of the rod brasses filled with the kind of strap that they use because they have not familiar with it and did not loosen the bolt before trying to drive the key. This shows the draw strap and the forward end of the main rod. Okay, 46. Clamping valve with the main rod piston working. When the clamping the valve with the one port slightly with the lubricating cylinder in case of the main with the rod is left up with the piston allowed to move the cylinder, would you advise taking out the cylinder cock at the opposite end of where the port is left open? With the other words, would you advise the bolt cylinder cut out the cylinder cocks taken out? I have seen instructions to take out the cylinder cock at the end of the port is left open with the butt. It seems to me that when the piston moves toward the open port, it would go against the atmospheric steam pressure and partially vacuum at the other end of the cylinder, causing the greater resistance. Wherever both cocks are removed, the vacuum would be less. And how would you leave the port open, judging of the following steam from the cylinder cock? How much resistance would be in piston working against it if there's any danger cutting the cylinder? Would you have would you feel feed oil any faster of the disabled side? Answer: taking out the cylinder cock end of the cylinder with the left of the port over the opening of the port. The opening need not be more than the thickness of the piece of the tin, judging of the steam escaping the move of the valve until you get the steam to show the cylinder cock so they can be 2 or 3 feet away from the cock. All you want is just enough steam to keep the cylinder from cutting and carrying the oil into the cylinder. Due to this, the feed of the oil a little faster for the disabled side, but on the working side, when running shove out, the oil may be emitted through the oil pipe of the lubricator through the air inlet of the valve of the steam chest. It's not necessary to take out the other cylinder cock, as there is resistance of vacuum on each side of the piston. It would depend on the speed of the condition of the cylinder packing rings. There is no danger for the cutting of the cylinder if the engine is properly handled. However, there will be responsible consequentially damage, but if you follow the instructions, you will be safe in the handling of the engine above the manner. 47 key side rods with the 6-wheel for the connected with the engine keying of the side rods on the 6-wheel connected with the engine with the 2 keys with the front and with the back of the pin would be drive both keys from each with the pin just to open one, but if you have one, would you drive? 4 key side rods for the wedges with the properly seated with the lace for the engine with a straight track with the dead center on the side of the to be key, the key main pin with the middle connection with the brass fitting with necessary to slack off the other key with the side rods to do so. When you get the main pin with the middle connection brass keys, they key the back with the brass fit with the front end of the brass last, and both key with the gate rods of the proper length with the tri rods with the other dead center. If you move the rods easily with the both centers, you will have them with the right length with the proper key with the tighten up with the set screws. You will have no further trouble. 48. Indirect mount motion engine. What is an indirect motion engine? Answer. A direct motion engine is one with the design that the valve with the rod moves directly in the same direction of the eccentric rod. With the indirect motion is the motion where the valve moves in the direct opposite direction from that of the eccentric rod. 49. Lining up a stationary engine. How would you proceed to line up a stationary engine? Remove this answer. Remove the cylinder head, piston rod, and the stuffing box of gland crosshead connection rod. Turn off the cranking of the overcorder. First plate for the shaft level, then the eve of the rising of the lower and outer board bearing, and at the case of them may require the fastening of the one end of the stout cord, the better still, a fine wire. Some of the objective beyond with the crank of the pass over their end of the wire through the stuffing box with the cylinder, the fastening to the object with as before, with a pair of the inside calipers taken with the distance between the wall of the cylinder and the wire at each end of the cylinder, with also one or more of the intermediate points for the purpose of bringing the wire into the exact center of the cylinder, while the wire occupied with the perfectly centered position throughout the length of the cylinder. In turn, the crank with the around the crank pin just touch with the outer underside of the wire when the pin occupies the position of the distance from the wire of the inside shoulder of the collar of the pin should be and same with the both sides on the wire, but not equalized with the distance moving the outboard bearing slightly as the case of the may require. Now turn the crank around, bring the pin up to the wire of the opposite side with the rise of the again with the measure for the distance of wire inside of the collar of the should be as before, which should be the same with the opposite end. But if the engine is fitted with the locomotive guide bars and the single bar guide with the distance between the wire to the guide should be taken in with the calipers at the end of the stroking of the stroke, and then equalize the distance from the wire slightly moving the guides in case if the required should be stabbed be much over the line with required with a considerable movement outboard bearing. It would be advisable to remove the quarter back for the scrape them and to even the bearing with the other side of the shaft. The new position will be liable to bear very heavily at the end of the quarter of the boxes only with the cause of excessive eating, and the replace all the parts with the remove of the banking the necessary adjustments for the crank and the dead center to the engine opposite end of the dead center. Make sure that the crank passes the dead center easily. These are the type of the main rods: rectangular cross section cross section type A, I. B is one I cross section type. BB is the brass and versus brass is straps, and KK is keys over the adjusting brass, CC set of screws, and 2 guard setting and screw setting positions, and then OO oil caps. Type of side rods: rectangular cross section with the strap ends, I cross section with the solid key KK, key for the upper wire with the brasses and the strap end, but no provisions made, and the solid end of the type of the worn with the most be replaced with new ones. So these type of the main rods, type of the side rods. And moving on to function 50 function of the ball valve with the Michigan lubricator, with which is the function of the valve with the oil pipe with the steam chest for the Michigan lubricator, where the station of the throttle is open. This Michigan lubricator is equipped with the steam chest plug valve with the valve. The valve is perfectly round with the will notice at the nearest the side of the valve. There is a small hole with the side of the ordinary choke plug. The position of the ball with the throttle is closed in the seat, and the small hole serves as the choker. Answer for the sum of the position lubricated with the adjusted steam with the throttle open with the steam chest with the pressure greater with the oil pressure with the valve lead with the seat allowed with the full size opening with the oil plug and the plug communication between the steam and the chest lubricated. Remove the choke plug with the feature of the steam chest with the greater with them restore with the choker when the lubricated pressure is greater than the throttle closed. And that concludes tape 1. We'll start with 51 through 400 next time.